Today we're diving into a story that, honestly, starts like a fairy tale, a romantic honeymoon cruise, but it ends in a baffling disappearance, a seriously botched investigation, and a question that has haunted a family for nearly 2 decades. What really happened to George Smith at sea?
So, picture this. It's the summer of 2005. You've got this newly married couple, young, full of promise, stepping onto a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Their destination? The Mediterranean. But what they're really embarking on is the start of their new life together.
And for the first few days, it was pretty much everything they dreamed of. Sun, sea, and just the pure bliss of a new marriage. But on the 5th day of that voyage, that perfect picture, it just shattered.
26-year-old George Smith vanished. One moment he's on his honeymoon cruise, and the next, he's gone. Not just missing from his cabin, but from the entire ship, almost as if he was just swallowed by the sea.
Okay, so let's get into the details of this case. And we have to start with the two people right at the absolute center of this whole story. So at the heart of this, you have George Smith, 26 years old, from a well-off family in Connecticut, and his new bride, 25-year-old Jennifer Hagel. They were actually college sweethearts who had just tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony that June. This cruise was supposed to be the perfect start. And this, right here, is where the mystery really begins. Like the slide says, on that 5th day, George just vanished. But look, this wasn't a simple case of someone going missing. A key detail is that his body has never, ever been found, leaving nothing but questions behind. To even begin to understand what might have happened, we have to zoom way in on one specific window of time, the night of July 4th, stretching in to the early hours of July 5th. This is the timeline where everything went horribly wrong.
Now, this timeline is just fascinating because it shows how fast things went south. It starts off with heavy drinking in the casino, but then comes this absolutely critical detail from the security footage. The couple returns to their cabin around 4 a.m., and they are not alone. They're with 4 other men. Just 30 minutes later, a loud thud is heard from their balcony. And then by morning, a crew member makes a chilling discovery: a huge bloodstain right below their cabin.
This is it. This is the last sound anyone ever reported in connection with George Smith. The guests in the cabin directly below his heard it, a noise on their ceiling, a thud that they described as being like something heavy falling. It's a sound that could have been anything, but in this context, it suggests something truly awful happened.
Okay, now let's talk about how the initial response to this discovery just completely complicated the investigation from the get-go, maybe even to the point where it couldn't be solved.
And this just perfectly illustrates the series of catastrophic failures. The most crucial piece of physical evidence, that bloodstain, was cleaned up by cruise line staff before the FBI could even get there to process it properly. The 4 men last seen with George, they were questioned briefly and then just allowed to get off the ship. George's wife, Jennifer, gave inconsistent statements, and the cabin itself was never properly secured as a crime scene. It was just a complete cascade of errors.
In the aftermath of all this, George's widow, Jennifer, she sued Royal Caribbean. The lawsuit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but it was reported to be over $1 million. And after that settlement, a really crucial detail comes out. She reportedly stopped cooperating with the FBI's investigation. So, with a totally compromised crime scene and key witnesses basically scattered to the wind, investigators were left with this complex web of suspicion that was pointing in a whole bunch of different directions. This table really breaks it all down. First, you've got Jennifer, his wife. She was in the cabin but claimed she was so intoxicated that she passed out and remembered absolutely nothing. Then you have the 4 men, the last people to see him alive. And then there's Royal Caribbean itself, whose actions in cleaning that bloodstain have led to serious questions of incompetence or maybe even a cover-up. And the suspicion around those 4 men? It would only get deeper as time went on. A couple years later, in 2007, one of them was convicted in a totally separate case, a rape that, chillingly, also happened on a cruise ship. This just added another really sinister layer to the whole mystery.
And so, the years just started to pass. Despite all the media attention and the family's tireless fight for answers, the official investigation just stalled, and the case went cold.
For almost 2 decades now, George Smith's parents have been on this painful crusade. They've fought relentlessly for any little piece of information, any clue at all that could bring some justice for their son. Then, in 2011, a pretty stunning official announcement comes from the FBI.
and it confirms the family's absolute worst fears. They stated their belief that George Smith was murdered, most likely thrown overboard after some kind of violent struggle. But there was a catch. Because of that botched initial investigation, they said they had insufficient evidence to ever charge anyone with the crime.
And that's exactly where this case stands today. It's officially open, but it's frozen in time. The FBI believes it was murder, the family believes crucial evidence was destroyed, and after nearly 20 years, the question that haunts this entire story is exactly the same as it was on that July morning in 2005: who killed George Smith on his honeymoon?